Yo, what's up, everyone? Today is Saturday, May 23rd, 2026. Real Sun Car Hours, your favorite Pan African socialist political podcast where we talk about news, current events, culture from an explicitly and unapologetically Pan African and socialist perspective. Um yeah, so there's a lot to talk about today. Cuba, Voting Rights Act, um, Iran, the global oil crisis, um, and the ongoing fuckery of the Democratic Party, the party that loves to just constantly eat shit all the time. Um, and what the fuck they're gonna do, with the fucking midterms and there's a lot we're gonna talk about. Anyway, yeah, I'm Adam Hudson. Just find me on Instagram at adam.hudson5 on Instagram. But really, that's the best place you can find me directly. But for Real Sun Car Hours for the website, you can go to the website realsuncarhours.org and also, yes, become a patron, please, for $5 a month. You get access to bonus episodes. Patreon.com/realsuncarhours. And if you're listening to this on YouTube, become a subscriber. Click the subscribe button. More subscribers, more views. That bumps us up in the algorithm. But yeah, this is Adam Hudson here. Yeah.
And this is Peter MGunn. I uninstalled Instagram because I need to free up some brain space. It's really quite shocking how much sitting on your phone, especially when you wake up, can ruin your brain for the entire day. So I'm trying, but
that's a good idea.
Don't have much of a social media presence, especially Threads, which is just, we may get into Threads later.
Yeah.
The Democrats, but I think the top order of the day for me at least is what's happening with the United States and Cuba after the big bad United States decided to indict a 92-year-old man on something that supposedly happened 30 years ago. And these are the big bad imperialists, folks. I mean, it's just not to underplay the incredible amount of suffering that the United States is currently inflicting upon Cuba with its oil blockade, which is a result from taking out Maduro, because Venezuela was, after the Soviet Union collapsed, throughout the 90s, it was a very rough time for Cuba, but a big part of the Bolivarian Revolution with Chavez was Venezuela providing oil to Cuba, and that has, after the regime change, whatever the Call of Duty level that the U.S. did in Venezuela, there's essentially been no oil. There's one Russian tanker, and I honestly don't understand why there aren't more. Russia, can you fucking do something for somebody else just once in your life? It kind of pisses me off, because it's you're supposed to be part of the multipolar world, but you kind of don't really do much for anyone else, so I'm just saying a few more tankers might help. I don't know, but it's the the Trump administration is getting a little, they're getting frustrated because the war in Iran did not go anything resembling the way they wanted it to, and so now, so they can feel like themselves again, big bad America. Now they're picking on their old, neighbor rival to the south. But it's very funny what they are trying to do, because if they think they're gonna do a Venezuela style raid to get Raul Castro, who, one, is not the president anymore, is not in power, can't do anything, and two, once again, is 92 years old or maybe 94. He's in his 90s, is the point. Um,
Right.
that is not going to go well. Like it's going to be Bay of Pigs too, and this is like part of the issue that that the United States faces is they have tried for over 60 years to do some sort of like invasion operation or send some renegade Miami exiles back to do something. There's a lot of Cuban terrorists, and there's a lot of that in the 70s and 80s from Cuban exiles, which they never like to talk about when they want to talk about all the violence of the Cuban government. Like they have their own very sordid history. But they're like the island does face blackouts for the majority of the day. People are having to cook with charcoal,
Y-
which is
and he, sorry to cut you off, but even speaking of charcoal, even having to power their cars by charcoal.
which
Like I've seen,
crazy.
yeah,
I mean, one thing you gotta give them is like inventiveness, but I do find it funny because like live fire and cooking over charcoal is now like very in fine dining, and it's like, oh,
oh
this
yeah,
is like real, yeah, especially for over from like Argentina. They love doing that shit over there. But I just find it funny that it's like, this is like this advanced high level of grilling or whatever. And it's like it's also like what they're doing to survive. Um, it's just and the way Trump talks about it, he's speaking like a classic imperialist. Like the way he's like, I'll have the luxury of taking it whenever I want. I could do whatever I wanted with it. It's like it's some of the grossest shit I've ever heard, from this president, which says a lot. But he's channeling McKinley at his fullest, which is the only president in history he respects. I guess him and Andrew Jackson. But it's classic imperialism, except like I don't know, um, what they're going to do in the sense of they have to do it's like they sent the head of the CIA over there in like quote unquote secret talks or whatever to they were trying to like negotiate, they're trying to find like a Delcy Rodriguez, but
Mhm.
the amount of like this is kind of the difference between you know uh armed struggle, coming to power through armed struggle versus purely electoral means, is that like when you took power in armed struggle, like your security apparatus is going to be a lot more airtight, and like there's just a much
yeah,
bigger sense of buy-in amongst the government. It's much harder to turn anyone, and this is what they're discovering is that they can't there's no one they can turn inside the government to let this happen, because part of me is just like, I don't know, man, just like let them build a Trump Tower or something and then just get it over with. But like that's not obviously how it works. It's But, I mean, we will find out because they're gonna have to do something as long as Marco Rubio is Secretary of State, because this is his thing. And, if he wants to be president, he's got to deliver to the Miami Gusano community that
ugh.
is funding all of his shit. So he's got to deliver something, but I don't know what they're gonna do. Um, but I suppose we'll find out. But one thing I will say, and it's not, I don't call it a bright spot, but it's a good, interesting example of dialectics in action, let's say, which is that, Cuba has been dependent on imported oil for, since the revolution, to power its electrical grid. And what they're doing now, which they've essentially been forced to, is basically they're pulling off, one of the fastest and like most complete solar uh transitioning to solar power and renewable energy. Now, obviously, is not a thing that can happen overnight. And they say let me pull up the uh the their goal. So, it roughly makes up 10% of Cuba's electricity. I'll send the article. They are saying, the goal is to get it to 24% by 2030 and 100%, I think, by 2050. Which, if they can hold on until then, would just be a miracle. And it would be something where they are actually showing the way for the entire world. Um, you know, so I've been trying to think about, because it is like one thing I will say is I am happy with the amount of journalism that has been coming out and the way in which like lefty journalists in the US have been, going to Cuba and reporting on the ground and, that because I feel like there was it was much more of a dark island growing up in terms of, reporting from Cuba. And I think just the internet and social media has made it easier, and some of the relaxations during the Obama era, maybe, but that all got tightened back up. But they're realizing now that, like, you know, telling their story directly, is much more important to differentiate between them and the exile community, which is what I don't know what it is about the diasporic communities of America's enemies in that are in the United States and why they don't care like what actually happens to their supposed country folk, as long as they get their regime change. But it would be, I saw something that said it would take approximately 220,000 US troops to actually occupy the island and pacify it, which I don't think. I mean, the Trump administration and PD, like, they don't even know how to do something like that these days. Like, the American military is actually pretty far degraded from pulling off any kind of large scale uh, invasion in Cuba or Iran. I mean, it's not just like, oh, light footprint because, it's cleaner or whatever. It's like they actually can't do it. Um,
No, no,
they don't have
yeah,
the
even
discipline, they don't like the coordination, and yeah, the political will.
it,
So
and also like I mean, well, there's also I mean in terms of this is probably not needed for large scale occupations, but I think as we've mentioned before, but the U.S. Uh, munition stockpiles depleting, so we're running out of missiles. And also the U.S. military is having trouble finding new recruits from the younger generation. Because there's definitely, I think, a decline in real patriotism, but also another factor is a lot of young men can't pass the physical fitness test for the U.S. military. So yeah, it's less patriotism among younger people, and there's less physical fitness. So
I also like
um,
Gen Z doesn't even want to go to college. So
no, no, and it's like it's really weird because at least like with post 9/11, that recruitment was largely driven in part, yeah, in response to the 9/11 terrorist attacks. Like there was like a brief moment, like um, where it kind of felt like America wanted to come together. There's like this kind of moment of collective solidarity in a way of like wanting to come together and heal from this tragedy because America was not used to it, something like that, particularly something of that scale, like of nearly 3,000 people dying on American soil in that fashion. But then also you had the Islamophobia, and then there were a lot of younger people at the time, millennials, who joined the U.S. military because they really believed that they were joining the military to protect the country because the country got attacked. So you don't have that these days. There's not that sense of like oh, we need to join the military because America just got attacked. Like, there hasn't been a major attack by a foreign power in the past 25 years, particularly in the time frame that, like, uh you know, someone just coming out of college would have lived through. Because, as like I said, on my solo episode, um I am right now in the process of getting my teacher credential to teach history. So I'm in the process of becoming a history teacher, and right now I'm a substitute teacher. Um, but you know, so there's a lot of people of the young generation I interact with, and I mean, obviously there's a lot of differences in the classroom because um, screen addiction is a very big issue. Now teachers are like turning against it. So, you know, when I have my classroom, like, I want to minimize screen time as much as possible because it's not screens are not having a positive learning effect on children. But in addition to that, I've noticed just like among younger people of this generation, I've been noticing differences between how they're growing up and how we grew up, our generation, and to tie it to like the America's ability to occupy countries. Um, yeah, I've noticed. I don't think that there's a real sense of patriotism collectively among. I wouldn't even say just Gen Z because people have to realize Gen Z, the oldest Zoomers are approaching 30. So even the older Zoomers are probably technically they're almost getting too old to be recruited by the U.S. military. The military wants to recruit people fresh out of high school. So the ones graduating high school right now are on the cusp of Zoomer and Alpha. So this is the generation we're talking about. So
I mean, they'll
I
raise the recruiting age, but it's like
yeah.
they don't want someone like me over there. I mean, it's for obvious reasons I wouldn't do well in the military. But it is, yeah, 'cause the thing is like even if they were to do a false flag type situation or however anointed you want to get about 9/11, um, like people would immediately just be like, that's fake. Like
Yeah.
it wouldn't
Yeah.
even work the same way because
No.
they don't there's no trust in the media and the
No.
government,
No.
even among like people who lean right or even I guess the full-on MAGA people have to ride with their boy till the end, but like even people who lean right, it's like they still don't, it's just like nobody actually believes in any institution or anything. But yeah, to take it back to Cuba because it is like it's important to understand, Cuba's situation, in the broader imperial context and also like that black people in Cuba like benefited a lot from the Cuban Revolution, and they're not the majority of the ones who have left. And
Mm-hmm.
so it is very much a black issue. Like I don't really understand why anyone would argue that it isn't.
Mm-hmm.
But
And
also like I think one of the things that is inspiring is that, and one of the things that shows that like socialism can actually achieve things is that like they don't, they don't hide the difficulties from the people. Like they are upfront, like this is as bad as it is. This is why it's happening, Um, and we've got to figure out how to pull through this. And if you want to leave, you can leave, basically. It's a little hard, but it's like, and because of that, because they're honest and straightforward with their people, like people have more of a commitment to, their country, their homeland, and the revolutionary project. And I think because one of the things that always got me about the Soviet Union was like, why didn't the people like rise up to defend it when it was collapsing internally? And is because like they kind of lost the like belief in the continuity of the history, part of mean, part of during Glasnost, like there's a lot of like CIA shit that was getting pumped in there. But also like the things they had brought up to like believe in the history of the Russian Revolution and Lenin and all this stuff in and Stalin, like they were lost. And so when the time came to defend the project, they weren't able to do it. But Cuba has learned to not make that mistake. And there would be incredibly fierce resistance if they try to invade, which I don't know because I suppose they could also just bomb the shit out of it, but um, maybe that's what they will end up doing. But it is like there, it's a little more contentious if the U.S. starts being like nakedly aggressive, like other Latin American countries will push back on that. But I also don't know um how much they care. It's one of those that it is a little confusing in the sense of like if America is really as evil as it makes itself out to be, why doesn't it just do the incredibly evil things? And I think it's just that the people running it are all incredibly venal, and they're more narcissistic than they are psychopathic, and they can't handle any amount of political difficulty to achieve their own psychopathic aims. And I guess that's the ultimate answer. But it just there's still just part of me that's just like, why do we still have to make this country suffer? Like, I don't understand, it's it's a little insane to me, the idea that like, oh, the US left might get too many ideas if Cuba starts becoming successful again. Just knowing what we know about the state of the US left. I don't think there's not much to worry about there right now necessarily, but it's to please like the Miami people, like they're not, why do they have such a chokehold on this stuff? Like at some point, like this helps no one. It
Right.
just hurts people. And it's just, I don't know, like at some point, like can't like why wouldn't you just be like they've suffered enough? I don't know. Other than just pure ego. Just we can't say, Cold War's been over for 30 fucking years. Or the Cold War is about to be over longer than it actually existed.
Yeah.
Um, so
I kind of, well, I am obviously not Cuban, but I have technically been to Cuba when I traveled to and reported from
it's
Guantanamo.
there.
Guantanamo in
There's your
20.
Adam's been to Guantanamo mention for the
Yeah,
episode.
yeah. But I mean, no, something you said about uh reporting from Cuba by a lefty journalist made me think of that because I'm comparing like the actual logistics of flying to Gitmo. Um, like we couldn't fly through Cuban airspace to get there, so we had to take a flight from uh Andrews Air Force Base in Washington D.C. Take a chartered flight from there to the U.S. military base at Guantanamo Bay. And if you look at a map to fly from D.C. to Cuba, if you took a straight flight, you would go over Cuban airspace. But we had to kind of fly around to land at the base so that you wouldn't fly over Cuban airspace because of the tensions between the U.S. government and the Cuban government. And also the fact that the Cuban government does not want that U.S. military base there, and sure as fuck does not want it running a torture center in Gitmo. I say that because, like, yeah, the logistics of like trying to get to Cuba, like, it's not easy. So, Yeah, there may have been some like probably some ease of restrictions, particularly in the Obama era, to go to like the rest of mainland Cuba, because when I went on that reporting trip, I remember asking like, could I go to the mainland to like check it out, and it was like, no, you can't do that. There's also like barbed wire fences and guard towers and shit. So like, and there's like a ton of like disconnected roads that like logistically, if you're on the U.S. military base at Gitmo, you can't go from the base to the rest of the mainland. Versus like if you're on a U.S. military base in other parts of the world, let's say for example like Japan, uh, it's obviously very easy for U.S. soldiers to like mill about in the rest of Japan if they're stationed there, right? Not the case at the U.S. base in Guantanamo on in Cuba. So I say that because yeah, the logistics of getting to Cuba are not easy. So I have respect for people who are willing to go to, if they're from the U.S. and they're willing to go to mainland Cuba and report from there. Like I have respect for that, and I'm glad to see like yeah more coverage coming from mainland Cuba from Cubans themselves. And also there's a woman a, she works at Belly the Beast Cuba. She's a black woman journalist. I'm trying to remember her name. Da, 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 da. But it's Belly the Beast. Let me search up um who she is. But she's but if you want to, if from the Cuban perspective, like you guys should check out Belly the Beast Cuba. It's a pretty good, yeah. It's basically just on the ground journalism from Cuba, and it's really good. I've been following them on social media, and it's independent media. I definitely want to hype up. Yeah, if you want some news about Cuba from a Cuban perspective, directly from oh, here we go. Liz Oliva Fernandez. There you go. She's one of the main journalists. She's a black Cuban woman journalist, doing some really good reporting about Cuba and like particularly how the U.S. blockade is impacting Cubans. And I do emphasize the fact that yeah, she's a black woman from Cuba, in Cuba, and if you look at a lot of the reporting from Belly the Beast Cuba, you'll see how the U.S.'s blockade of Cuba and particularly blockading of oil, how it's impacting a lot of black people, black Cubans, and contrast that with the representation of Cubans you see here in the U.S. is very white. So, and that just to give some historical context, for those who may not be familiar, but the reason why there is a black population in Cuba is because Cuba was a major part of the transatlantic slave trade. So it was a Spanish colony, and the Spaniards were the ones who were enslaving African people in Cuba, and Cuba, along with Jamaica, Haiti, and the Dominican Republic, they were very crucial in the transatlantic slave trade because of sugar plantations. So there's a lot of sugar plantations that grew in those Caribbean islands. Like I said, particularly Dominican Republic, Haiti, Jamaica, and Cuba. So hence why you see very significant black populations on those islands, because in the same way that like African Americans are descendants of enslaved Africans brought to North America, and the major cash crop that was grown in North America was cotton because it required a shit ton of land. So the giant landmass of North America made it conducive to have big ass cotton fields. The major cash crop that fueled the transatlantic slave trade was sugar in the Caribbean. So hence why there are a lot of people of African descent in Cuba. But tying it to, the Cuban Revolution and the Miami Gusanos, a lot of those white Cubans in Miami were the white elites of Cuba who ran Cuba for a very long time. before the revolution. Um, like the white privilege of whites in Cuba go back to slavery and the legacy of Spanish colonization in Cuba. And Latin America had its own racial hierarchy, and it accommodated more for the reality of racial mixing. So like, someone that's of mixed heritage, they would be considered like mulatto or some other category versus than just like black here in the U.S. But the white Cubans in Miami, I think part of the reason why like they're so fucking hell bent on punishing Cuba is because, like, quite frankly, I think a lot of them are just still fucking butthurt that they were on the losing end of the Cuban Revolution, and basically after the Cuban Revolution, they had to give up a lot of like their fucking land and their economic privilege,
and their slaves.
Yeah, and they're slaves. Yeah, so the Cuba, yeah.
If you want to see a great movie, that is from Cuba that was sort of made with Soviet help. It's called Soy Cuba. You can find it on the internet, on Internet Archive, I'm pretty sure. And it like demonstrates sort of what the reality pre-revolution was, because, might as well fill out the history. Because the United States has invaded Cuba before, in 1898 in the Spanish-American War, and we did it under the guise of Cuban independence and
Yep.
promoting freedom for Cuba. But then immediately a little thing called the Platt Amendment, which is one of those things that I remember, just you go past it in U.S. history and then you don't realize what it was until later. But it basically gave the U.S. the right to intervene at any given time, and so
yeah,
Cuba was basically run as a U.S. protectorate. And by the time we got to the 1950s, it was just it was literally the mafia running it. It was a straight up gangster state. So, it is still, they're still mad. They are still mad about that. But I feel like a lot of those people have died off, and it's like, even with the second and third waves of immigration, is like, I think some of the more recent ones, people are a little bit softer because they still have family back there. But it's still very much, because it is a much more stark divide, because the Spanish did exterminate all the indigenous people on that island. So
yeah,
it is very much like white. It is a little starker, like white and black.
Yeah, and to dig further into that, because ever since I went to Gitmo, like, I've been obsessed with Guantanamo and also even the history of Cuba and particularly Cuba, in the context of colonization and the slave trade. But a lot of the the Guanahatabe and a lot of the Taino people, were wiped out by the Spaniards. And so the Platt Amendment, that's true. Yeah, so the Platt Amendment is crucial because that's why Guantanamo exists. So that was part of like the stipulation of the Platt Amendment. It was the U.S. has a right to intervene militarily in Cuba whenever it wants, and also like it established that the U.S. has a right to keep a military base at Guantanamo Bay. The reason why that location, Guantanamo Bay, was picked was because at the time, we're talking 1898, so the turn from the 19th to the 20th century, ships were powered by steam. So steam power, you need a lot of coal. So the location of Guantanamo Bay, it was useful for U.S. ships to refuel there. So that's why the base at Guantanamo Bay was established. Was basically, it was for the purpose of like coaling and refueling for the U.S. Navy in the Caribbean. And also, when it comes to shit like, this is one thing I was thinking of, particularly like with the U.S. doing these unilateral military strikes in the Caribbean against suspected drug boats. When the U.S. wants to launch a military strike in the Caribbean, Guantanamo Bay is a very useful point of operation to launch an attack. So that's another reason why it's there, in addition to it being a torture facility. And why the U.S. still keeps that base there, because there's other uses for Guantanamo, and I think Guantanamo is probably, because there's other U.S. military bases in the region, but I think like Guantanamo is probably like the most crucial one, because where it's located, if the U.S. wants to do some dirty work in Latin America, like there's already a U.S. base there for the U.S. to launch an attack, so it's useful to view Guantanamo as like where it fits within the U.S. war machine in the Caribbean and Latin America. So it's served that use. That's like why that U.S. base at Guantanamo is there. And then there was also like a treaty signed in, I believe, 1934. It was during Franklin Delano Roosevelt. It was like, in addition to the Platt Amendment, it said that the U.S. can only get rid of that base at Guantanamo if both sides agree to it and the U.S. no longer uses it. Which basically meant that even if the Cuban government does not want the base there, that's not enough reason for the base that the U.S. has to leave. The U.S. has to also agree to get rid of the base and no longer use it. So in the case of like the Cuban government post-revolution has consistently said, we don't want the fucking base there on Cuban soil, the U.S. is like, yeah, well, we're just going to keep doing it. So technically, legally, the U.S. can still keep that base there because, yeah, it was signed during a time, because before it was Castro, it was Fulgencio Batista. He was the U.S.'s guy in Cuba. He was a dictator. So before there was Castro, it was Batista. He was the one running Cuba for U.S. interests. And yeah, it was a place where like the mafia could do whatever the fuck they wanted in Cuba. But yeah, that is the history of U.S. empire in Cuba, and also Spanish colonization. But yeah, I definitely recommend people check out Billy the Beast. At least follow them on social media, because yeah, I have mixed feelings about Instagram, but also like it gives me a chance to follow people like Billy the Beast, because there will be some useful stuff they post on there. But again, I can't help but notice that stark contrast between when I see stuff that Billy the Beast reports and hear the perspective of black people in Cuba compared to Marco Rubio or the other, like when you see or hear Cubans in the US, like the Cuban American diaspora is pretty white, you know, and their politics are very fucking, and I think like the current generation of like Cuban Americans, like one thing I've noticed, like, because sometimes I'll get curious about like, you know, stuff that they say, but I forgot, it was some post I think on YouTube or somewhere from a white Cuban American woman who was saying like, yeah, the reason why a lot of Miami Cubans are like so conservative is because like, she was just saying the quiet part out loud, that they lost their plantations in Cuba and they're pissed about it, and that's why they're super conservative. But I do think that part of the reason why the U.S. is doing this shit is because I think within the Cuban American diaspora, a lot of like their reactionary politics, and also quite frankly their racism and anti-blackness, they pass it down to younger generations. So I think that's also part of it as well, that like, because it is an interesting question, like why isn't the Cuban American diaspora like calling for, hey, stop punishing Cuba? Because like you would think that like, hey, they might have some family members like who probably would be getting fucked over by the U.S. cutting off fuel for Cuba.
Well, that's the beauty of becoming American, is you get to say fuck your family. You know?
Yeah, and you know what? Like, I mean, that also kind of like to tie it in, like with Iran. I mean, speaking of oil, right? Like with this thing, what I've been kind of obsessed with, paying attention to, is this fucking global oil shock. Because one thing I mentioned on my solo episode that's worth mentioning now, the closure of the Strait of Hormuz, specifically the closure to countries that are allied with like the U.S. and Israel, right? Um, that's leading to higher fertilizer prices, the cost of fertilizer, because apparently I didn't know this until recently. A lot of fertilizer is nitrogen based and relies on the production of oil. Apparently, so it's not
Yeah.
like it's not like natural fertilizer where it's just like cow shit or something like that. And you're just like, hey, spray some shit on the ground and it
No,
fertilizes.
why would we do that when we can use petroleum?
Yeah,
I mean,
yeah,
back in the day, it was, I think, like that was a guano was like a main export of Peru for that reason, like
yeah,
back in the day.
yeah,
But yes, now everything from our clothes to our food to our medicine is based in petroleum.
yeah. And for those of you who don't know, yeah, guano, that's basically bird shit. So just crap from like birds, seals. Uh, that's what guano is. But yeah, it used to be, yeah, it uses like a natural, like a fertilizer for crops. But so the rising price of fertilizer is causing worry for farmers because like they can't afford to grow all their crops. So that could lead to some very real fucking food shortages and the increase in price for food because of the increase in price for fertilizer. Um but anyway, I mentioned that because like the Iranian American diaspora, like their politics are like, I mean, there are some who are very critical of US imperialism, but you know, some of them are kind of like the Cuban diaspora. Very fucking, you know, pro-Western, kind of conservative. Like, yeah, go ahead and bomb our country. But it's also like, wait a minute. If you're like a first generation Iranian, right? Let's say if you're Iranian, you're born in the US, but let's say your parents are born in Iran but moved to the US. Like, you probably have like extended family who live in those countries. That's the case with a lot of like immigrants. You know, if they're like first or second generation, they got extended family back in their homeland. You would think like, you know, if you're calling for the U.S. to bomb your country, wouldn't some of your actual relatives, not just your people in the sense of like people of your ethnic background, but like your little extended fucking family still living there, why would you call for bombing your home country knowing that your extended family can be at risk of that? Like that is incredibly fucking weird, you know? And like I think we said this before, but it's like, I mean, you know, there are a lot of diaspora communities in the US who like their perspective doesn't always match the perspective of the people who are still living in like their home country. You know, it's like when America gets immigrants, like you're not always getting the most radical or revolutionary people coming to the US. You're usually getting the people who maybe are petty bourgeois and come and have like some, you know, kind of conservative politics.
Yeah, well,
And
getting to the U.S. ain't free, you know. So
you're right, yeah. So there's that. But you know, but be that as it may, like we're not. My point is that like you know, this gets to like the whole issue with like representation and listen to X voices, right? Uh, Communities are not monolithic, so you know the diaspora communities in the U.S. are not always. That's not to say don't listen to diaspora communities. I'm not saying that. What I am saying is that, um, you know, they'll represent like one perspective of their home country, and they may not always be in line with like the exact feelings of the people who are living in their home countries, and that's not to say that they're less worthy of listening to or whatever, or like they're less, you know, culturally tied. But it's just like, look, no community is a monolith, and like that's why you know the some of the standpoint epistemology that's been so popular in the last like 10 years and like center X voices. It does get a little
yeah,
just
I mean, we did that
cartoonish.
with centering Venezuelan voices and centering Iranian voices. I would say with the Cuban diaspora, like they're so sloppy at this point, and it's so like very nakedly like from the CIA, like the talking,
Yeah,
like not just the talking points, but the outlets themselves. That it's hard to be like, yeah, they they really are speaking for their compatriots back home when it's also like the government will do interviews with U.S. media and like it's like yeah I I mean the internet and social media now that it has sort of reached Cuba, it makes it a lot harder to pull off that kind of operation that the CIA was very very successfully able to hide behind in the sense that like a lot of American liberals just went along with that. And they were happy to
yeah,
go along with it because it didn't make them think any harder about the situation.
yeah. Um, should
Spe
we?
anyway, speaking of American liberals not thinking, you like that one?
Yeah. Let's. Yeah, there we go. That's a good one. Yeah, let's. Should we? Yeah, let's talk about the Voting Rights Act. 'Cause I feel like liberals not thinking, particularly like two steps ahead, could have prevented this from happening. But yeah, the Supreme Court recently uh, gutted the Voting Rights Act. Um, Basically, it ruled against the creation of black majority congressional districts. But this is the case of Louisiana. Um, they ruled against the creation of another black majority congressional district in Louisiana, and particularly like the issue was contesting the use of race to create new congressional districts. So that is what the Supreme Court ruled against. Uh, Clarence Thomas, the poster child for being a coon.
When I saw it on Instagram, I saw someone did like a Coon Madness, like a March Madness bracket, and Clarence Thomas was number one, and he went all the way through.
Yeah,
Um,
yeah. Wait, who else was on there? I'm curious.
I mean, you'll have to look it up. I mean, Candace Owens, obviously, I think she was like a
Yeah,
number
yeah,
two seed, and
yeah. That
but
makes
a
sense.
bunch of people I didn't recognize, but there's a lot more of them on YouTube these days than there used to be. Um,
Oh yeah, yeah,
but yeah, I didn't want to say like with the Voting Rights Act, part of the thing was that it basically sort of had required the states to pre-clear the like in its original instantiation, it required states to pre-clear like yeah, their districting with the federal government because they would just be like because the federal government could be like, all right guys, you can't rig districts in a way to disenfranchise black people, and they'd be like, all right, you know we told you not to. But this was actually like in the 60s, like when it was like we need to give the federal government some teeth to enact civil rights legislation, they actually had to, yeah, the federal government had to sign off on like state districting. And obviously this made white racists and conservatives extremely mad. And so from there, it's a states' rights issue, like it always is. But it is one of those things where it's like, yeah, there probably would be a point where, the Supreme Court would, come up with some argument like as to why that can't happen anymore. It's worth remembering always that this is the same body that gave us the Dred Scott decision, and
right,
Supreme Court really ain't worth shit. um,
right. Yeah, and also to explain. Okay, to I think this could use like some further explanation as like why something like this is problematic because um the Voting Rights Act, the main thing it accomplished was the like elimination of racial discrimination when it comes to voting, and part so basically like expanding voter enfranchisement. to
Getting rid of
people who are.
literacy tests.
Yeah, yeah, exactly. So that was the accomplishment of the Voting Rights Act. And this is again that came on the heels of the Civil Rights Act. So there was a 1964 Civil Rights Act, 1965 Voting Rights Act, and also keep in mind, around the same time there is a change in immigration law. So the reason why there are more non-white immigrant diaspora communities in the United States comes on the heels of these landmark decisions. So, so that means it is very true that, yeah, the landmark legislative victories that were accomplished as a result of the Black American liberation struggle expanded freedoms for everyone in this country. So that's why you see more Asians, and I mean Asians of all types, like South Asians, East Asians, Southeast Asians, Pacific Islanders, Arabs, then Iranians, people from other Latin American countries. You have more non-white people because of the struggle of Black Americans. It changed immigration law in the U.S. So it's important for people to view the Voting Rights Act in context of that. Another part of the voting, what was important about making essentially making sure the Voting Rights Act, actually had some teeth, was basically to ensure that racial and ethnic minorities have actual representation in the political process, particularly when it comes to Congress and congressional districts. So there's this I think good report. It came out like almost 10 years ago from the Brennan Center for Justice, Minority Representation, No Conflict with Fair Maps. This is the introduction to it, but I thought like it'd be worth mentioning here. It says the Voting Rights Act requires states under some circumstances to create legislative and congressional districts where minorities are a majority of the district population. Majority minority districts are intended to remedy vote dilution and ensure minorities have a fair chance to participate in the political process. This prescription worked. Beginning in the 1990s, majority minority districts are credited with increasing minority representation in legislatures and Congress. Yet from the start, some conventional wisdom took hold about how majority-minority districts resulted in unfair maps. The widespread belief became that majority-minority districts, particularly in the South, gave Republicans a big and unfair advantage. According to this narrative, heavily concentrating reliably Democratic voters in majority-minority districts bleached the surrounding districts. These bleached districts, which had a history of electing white Democrats, then flipped and became voted Republican. Some political commentators have even argued that majority-minority districts were a significant factor in the 54-seat swing in House seats in the 1994 election, given the GOP control of the chamber for the first time in 42 years. Insofar as it goes, there is some truth in the narrative. The lack of majority districts before 1990 had preserved the incumbency of many white Democrats, even as Southern white voters were shifting en masse toward the Republican Party. So, like, yeah, white Democrats. So think of like, okay, obviously Bill Clinton was one. Joe Biden, Bill Clinton. Those kind of like white Democrats who kind of represented blue collar voters. This is kind of what they're talking about. Who are seen as like representing, like white blue collar voters. Ben Ginsburg, general counsel to the Republican National Committee in 1990, and one of the principal architects of the GOP strategy to urge creation of majority and minority districts, recalled, "We began looking at the data and we saw that white Southern Democrats had dominated the redistricting process literally since the Civil War, and that had created underrepresentation for two groups, Republicans and minority voters." Okay. It kind of keeps going on, but then with the Supreme Court set to take up the constitutionality of partisan gerrymandering, it is an apt time to test the thesis of inherent tension. It turns out the answer is an emphatic no. The authors reviewed 3 decades of redistricting in 20 states with majority minority districts and found that the creation of these districts did not result in biased maps. In fact, if anything, majority minority districts tended to reduce overall partisan bias. So basically, like, this report's kind of looking at, like, if the creation of majority and minority districts create bias. But I bring it up because one thing I was looking at. Okay, trying to find. I think I had the maps. Sorry, let me find the maps because I was looking at the maps and I got them out. Race and ethnicity, U.S. congressional districts. Oh, here we go. And then blah blah blah. Race and ethnicity use. Here we go. Oh, okay. Here we go. This is what I want to look at. So it's one thing, okay, to make sure that non-whites, people of color, black people have the right to vote. But then you also need to make sure that the interests of racial and ethnic minority are actually represented in Congress. There's this article in APM Research Lab, and the title is, the wider the congressional district, the more likely it is to be represented by a Republican. Okay, so basically congressional districts that tend to be more white tend to be more Republican. And if you look at the demographics of the United States, it is changing. The United States is becoming more racially diverse. That is part of the reason why you see this uptick in, like, white nationalism and the popularity of, like, the Great Replacement theory is this fear that, white Americans will become a minority. And as soon as, like, let's say 20 years from now, non-white people are going to outnumber non-Latino whites. And that also kind of gets into, like, when it comes to Latinos, that's not a racial category so to what extent do, like, are, like, the kind of conventional whites in white America, to what extent are they going to bring in white Latinos as part of whiteness, right? So that's also a question that hangs in the air. But so that's why we have the category of, like, non-Hispanic white or non-Latino white, because basically we're talking about white Americans who are not, like, from Latin America. This country is becoming more racially diverse. Like, I'll even talk about it locally, like where I live in Pittsburgh, California. You go further east to Antioch and Brentwood and Oakley. Apparently, I was looking at the history of those cities. There are a lot of white people who fled the Dust Bowl in the 30s who came to those cities, particularly like Brentwood, Oakley, very rural. That's, like, seen a lot of suburban growth in recent years, particularly the last 10 years. Anyway, one of the schools I've substituted for, it's technically in Oakley, but it's on the border of Antioch and Oakley. The demographics of students, I'm bringing this up as an example. The demographics of the students there are much more diverse. It's not just white kids. I can tell you from personal experience, when I was in high school and ran track for Pittsburgh High, we would compete against schools from that area. Antioch, Brentwood, Oakley. I remember those teams were all white. Our team was a diverse one. So whenever we competed, it was like a stark contrast. Now, those cities, again, within my lifetime, they used to be all white. There are much more Latinos, Asians, and black kids. And they're kind of recent. Like, they've been, like, so that's an example of, that's just one local example for me. But I think that's the case for a lot of communities in this country, that there are some places that used to be majority white and they're changing up a bit. So that means the way that's going to factor into how you draw up congressional districts, right? So the U.S. is becoming more diverse, but if you look at the number of congressional districts, most congressional congressional districts are white, like white majority. So basically, the representation of Congress and how congressional districts are drawn up don't match up with the actual changing demographics of the United States. So factoring in race in terms of how you draw up districts and the creation of majority minority congressional districts, like let's say majority black districts, it's meant to correct that imbalance. Because like, let's say you have a country that's becoming more racially diverse, but then you look at the congressional districts, they're still drawn up majority white. And then the people you elect to Congress and the Senate are majority white. You get into a question of like, okay, do the actual conventional political institutions, the legislative bodies of the United States, do they actually represent the country? They don't. So, in the spirit of what the voting rights was meant to achieve, yeah, it makes sense to, create majority minority congressional districts to correct that imbalance. That's why there are a lot of majority black congressional districts in the South, is to increase the representation of not just black elected officials. That's just one thing, but can the interests of black people be actually represented in Congress? And not just black people. Like, there's a map. I'm looking at this map. Their congressional districts were like, it's majority Latino. Case in point, California. There's a lot in California alone. There's a lot of majority Latino congressional districts. So the Supreme, and also this is what I think is the fucking hypocrisy, because the argument from the Republicans is like, well, we should use race to create new congressional districts because that's not in spirit with the Constitution. It's not in spirit with the Constitution if you factor in race, man. Except when, like, when the fucking Constitution was originally drawn up, where you had the 3/5 compromise. Oh, okay, you could factor in race there. Okay, like the 3/5 fucking compromise was in there, and like, okay, you factor race in there. Okay, and the GOP is already using this decision, by the way, to start splintering the black voting bloc. Right,
it may backfire.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, this is where I think the fucking hypocrisy. If the GOP were serious in principle about, like, eliminating the use of race to draw up congressional districts, what they would do if they were serious in principle on that is they would review and curtail the prevalence of white majority districts. Because if they're going to say, we shouldn't have majority racial... okay, let's look at all the fucking congressional districts in the country and start redrawing it. Okay? What about the majority white districts that are majority of this country? How about we start redrawing that shit? Maybe we should... Because I'm pretty sure if we go through the entire map of the U.S., there are some congressional districts that should be redrawn to reflect the actual changing demographics of this country. But, again, the vast majority of congressional districts are white, and that actually it's more than a national average. Like 60% of the country is white, but more than 60% of congressional districts are majority white, which means that the Congress, in the way it's drawn up, doesn't actually reflect the changing demographics of the country. So, just based on that alone, the changing demographics of the country and the fact that we have a census that gets done every 10 years, it would make sense to redraw districts and make sure that they reflect the actual changing demographics of the country. But the reason why this decision was made by this majority conservative Republican justices was because, look, they know that black people are the most reliably, consistently Democratic-leaning voting base in the country. Like black Americans, like black Americans are the most reliable non-white racial ethnic minority demographic that is reliably Democratic. Not Asians, not Latinos. It's black people, right? So I think this is a way for the Republicans to just basically splinter the black vote and to hurt the Democratic Party when it comes to the midterms. That's why I think this Supreme Court decision was made. Like entirely for political reasons. It's not about like we care about the Constitution and blah 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 blah. Like we need to be race neutral. Like okay, if you want to, if your concern is that race is being used to drop congressional districts, yeah, how about you review the majority white congressional districts? Like maybe you should redraw those fucking maps. But yeah, that's my what I have to say about the Supreme Court decision on the Voting Rights Act. And by the way, this is not an argument for like we need a Democratic Party. Like the Democratic Party is a dog shit party, but like this is clearly meant to just like another way to just like fuck over the voting power of black people and to like further entrench
Well, yeah,
white political power.
because they know
Yeah.
they're gonna get screwed in the midterms because they've just completely fucked over the entire country and have not even pretended that any of the things that they're doing are for the benefit of the American people. Like it's crazy how Trump these days is just like, yeah, I don't, the American people, fuck them. Who gives a shit? Okay, it's about
Right.
me, which,
Yeah.
yes, obviously, that no surprise that that's how he thinks, but it's just like, man, is, but I mean, for, the, like, congressional districts are drawn up by state legislatures, and, it's always been a mystery in my mind as to why the Democratic Party has never had any strategy for reclaiming state legislatures because they lost so many, especially in the 2000s,
Oh
and
yeah.
that they've never. It doesn't seem like they've ever been serious about trying to take it back because it is not hard to get elected to a state legislature. Most of them are part time
Yeah.
anyway, so
Right.
either of us could be elected to state rep. Um,
That's true. Yeah.
and so yes, it's this white nationalist Supreme Court that which has I mean that's basically redundant. Supreme Court's always been that. Uh,
Yeah.
yes, they're trying they're like this is the Republican Party firmly in control. But this is also all they know how to do is just like more voter suppression. Well, we're gonna get try to stanch the bleeding at the midterms by just doing more voter suppression. Um, I mean, I suppose the question is like, what is the response? And yeah, the like the Democratic controlled states are, redrawing their maps to try and offset everything. I don't know. I've always just when it comes to gerrymandering just been like we got to get rid of the whole thing. Like no congressional district has ever made any sense to me looking at it on a map. Um, but you know, I suppose my lack of caring about this at my 21.50 an hour service sector job is a reflection of my privilege, but it I mean, because that's what they always say. If you don't hang out with bated breath about everything that happens to the Democrats, it's because you're so privileged. Um, I it's just like, yeah, this is what they're gonna do, and the question is like, are the Democrats just gonna, whenever, if ever, they take power again, are they gonna allow the Supreme Court to just exist as it is? You can actually do something about it. You have the power to do it, and the fact that they don't, it still is like court packing is seen as like a scandal. Like this is undemocratic. No, actually, the Supreme Court is the most undemocratic part of the U.S. government. These people are not elected and serve for life. So the idea that like, oh, messing with the Supreme Court is against democracy, like, no, it's always been an extremely political body, an extremely bourgeois political body. It's basically like the bourgeoisie's last check on democracy. And so, yeah, like, what are you guys gonna do about it? Because you do have to be upfront about it. Like, it's the last vestige of the norms, and unfortunately, because the Democratic Party took a very retreat into the PMC and legalistic approach towards all political fights. They lionize the Supreme Court and RBG and everything. So it's like, there so many Democrats still love the Supreme Court for some reason. I don't. You got to be such a boring politics nerd to like, be awe-inspired with the halls of justice of the once
Oh
again
God.
the body that gave us the Dred Scott decision in Plessy versus Ferguson. I've
Right.
never understood it. But yes, this is what they were going to do. So yes, I would like to see, you know, a an acknowledgement that like the Supreme Court you could actually do something about it. But they're not going to because they're afraid to do anything.
A couple things. So, I think the reason why liberals lionize the Supreme Court, I think a lot of their starting point for lionizing the court, I think starts with like Brown v. Board. Uh, so seeing the Supreme Court, because we're really talking about the era of the Warren era of the Supreme Court and people like Thurgood Marshall. Um, is this idea that you could use the Supreme Court to expand liberal democratic freedoms. I think that's why like there's an obsession with the Supreme Court because I think there are a lot of these liberals who um, kind of like came of age in the post civil rights and yeah, it was really like it was Earl Warren who was also governor of California. But yeah, he was the Chief Justice of the Supreme Court from 1953 to 1969, and he is regarded as leading the Constitutional Revolution, basically turning the Supreme Court in a more liberal direction. So a lot of landmark decisions when it came to expanding rights in the United States, he wrote the majority opinions. So Brown v. Board of Education, Miranda v. Arizona. So when a police officer arrests you, they read you your what's called your Miranda rights. You have you have a right to remain silent. You have a right to an attorney. That was made in 1966. Earl Warren wrote the majority for that. Brown v. Board of Education, the desegregated schools. He wrote the majority decision for that, 1954. Loving versus Virginia, which basically ruled in favor of interracial marriage. That was 1967. Apparently, this is really interesting. He led the Warren Commission that investigated
I thought it
the
was the same
the
one.
the assassination of JFK. Mm-hmm. Warren was one of the most influential figures in U.S. history, particularly when it comes to the Supreme Court. So I say that because I think when liberals think of the Supreme Court, they think of the Supreme Court in the context of the legacy of Earl Warren and putting the Supreme Court in a more liberal direction. Although, I definitely since Earl Warren, the Supreme Court has gotten more conservative. But I think when liberals think of like the Supreme Court, well, I hear two arguments. Like if you listen to Sam Cedar, he obsesses over the Supreme Court, and I think he has his reason for it is I think legitimate, which is basically that like the Republicans using the Supreme Court to curtail, to basically consolidate a majority and like start curtailing rights. So I think like we look at the Supreme Court now, you can see it as like the very much the polar opposite of the Earl Warren court era
I
in the
I
60s.
I wanted to. Okay, I found what it was. Yeah, another
Mm.
great Earl Warren decision was Terry versus Ohio, which basically legalized stop and frisk. So, that's
Mm.
that is the liberal champion. Like, just for the record.
Right. Yeah. No. That. I'm glad you mentioned that. Yeah. I didn't know that. Okay. Wow. That happened. I mean, I'm partially not surprised, but I didn't know that particular
I
detail
couldn't
about Earl
remember if it
Warren.
was Earl Warren, but yeah, 1968. So,
Okay. So that basically, yeah. So to reiterate, yeah, that's what legalized stop and frisk. Which, for those of you not familiar, yeah, that really fucked over a lot of black people, particularly in New York City during Mayor Giuliana's Giuliani. Sorry, I don't know why I'm that. Rudy Giuliani, Rudy Giuliani's era in as mayor of New York City in the '90s, which is basically just like, yeah, you cops will just like randomly just stop and frisk whoever they suspect of being a criminal, which the primary targets of that were black people. But that is very fitting that like, yeah, he supported that, which you're right, that definitely encapsulates the liberal mindset of yeah, being very harsh on crime, but like, hey, we support interracial marriage and stuff like that. So but yeah, I think, yeah, I think when liberals are obsessed with the Supreme Court, that's part of the reason why they want to see the Supreme Court as like a vehicle to advance progressive change. Like even like during the Obama era, the Supreme Court ruled in favor of the constitutionality of gay marriage, right? I'm trying. I think Roe v. Wade. Now I'm curious. Roe v. Wade. I think was that must have been under the Burger Court. 1973. That was Roe v. Wade. That was who was, yeah,
well, and it
Warren Burger. Yeah, that was Burger.
well,
And yeah.
well, I want to say like, okay, like if you think it is a viable venue for that, then like that's the argument for judicial reform or court packing, whatever you want to call it. Like, if you want to use it
Right.
as a vehicle for progressive change, you got to do something about it. Like, you can't just, because it still blows my mind even that like John Roberts like doesn't get smoke. Like, people focus on, Alito and Clarence Thomas and the other ones, but John Roberts is still like, yeah, man, he's down the middle, man. He's pretty fair. It's balls and strikes, like you said.
Right.
And it's like,
Yeah.
no,
Yeah.
he is part of the white revanchist project.
Well, and also like, okay, so speaking of packing the court, um during the Obama era, there people were wondering like, hey, maybe he should ask Ruth Bader Ginsburg to step down and like appoint someone else to replace her because she was getting old. She refused to step down. He didn't really do much about it. But guess what? She died. And someone else fucking replaced her. She died it was during the Trump era. Yeah. Ruth Bader Ginsburg, she died. Let me get the year correct. But yeah, she died during 2020. There you go. During the Trump era.
I was 20.
And
Oh yeah, it was. I remember
yeah.
the like people were like projecting RBG onto the sides of buildings. That was during COVID, man.
Yeah. And guess who Trump picked to
Was,
replace
was
her?
that was that Amy Kobe Bryant?
Yep. Yeah. Amy Coney Barrett, but Amy Kobe Bryant. Yeah, it's Amy Coney Barrett. Yeah, she was a successor to Ruth Bader Ginsburg. Um. Uh. Oh, apparently her wish before her death, she said, "My fervent wish is that I will not be replaced until a new president is installed." Because she died on like, yeah, during the
Okay,
2020
yeah,
election.
right, okay.
So, but Trump didn't give a fuck about that. But it's like, okay, that could have been prevented if Obama. Okay, because she was born. Now on Wikipedia. She was born 1933. Okay, so during the Obama years, during Obama's second term, she was in her 80s. That would have been a good time for her to retire. She was like in her 90s. I don't get her exact year. Oh, sorry. She was 87 when she died. Okay, she was close to 90. She was 87 when she died. Yeah, my grandma, when she died, my grandma was 1 month shy from 90. Like, anyway, sorry.
I guess in her defense, Obama couldn't get freaking Merrick Garland through, so I don't know.
Yeah, right, yeah. But I mean but that's something again, the packing of the court, right? Because I've heard liberals say, well, I've heard this from like that god awful site Threads, but elsewhere, that once that the Supreme Court gutted the Voting Rights Act, liberals started blaming the left. They're like, oh, this is all your fault.
Well, yeah, that's all they do on Threads.
That's all they. And I'm like, wait a minute, how? Because, like, if Kamala would have gotten elected,
it doesn't make any sense for this election cycle. But it doesn't. That's them relocating 2016.
Oh, right, yeah. Good God! Oh my fucking no! It makes sense. Yeah, if you put it in that perspective, it makes sense logically. But like, whenever I heard them say it like verbatim, like they're saying in the context of 2024, like, see, if you voted for Kamala, this wouldn't have happened. How? Like, how would have Kamala like changed the representation of the Supreme Court? Because like, as far as we know, like, I mean, okay, wait, how old is Clarence Thomas? Clarence Thomas, he was born 1948.
Old enough to party.
I mean, he's 77, which is like, I mean, God. And look, when it comes to the senator, he's pretty much like a baby compared to the fossils in the Senate now. Because it's like 77, that's like, yeah, you're considered young at that age now. What, given all the old fuckers that, run our country. But, and keep in mind, for those who don't know, Clarence Thomas was nominated by George H.W. Bush to succeed Thurgood Marshall. He was the first African American to serve as a Supreme Court justice, and Thurgood Marshall was much more progressive. He was Thurgood Marshall was in the NAACP. But then the appointment of Clarence Thomas to succeed someone like Thurgood Marshall was almost like it was like a slap in the face. Like, yeah, we'll put a black person on the Supreme Court, but like they made sure to find the biggest coon they could on the planet to succeed Thurgood Marshall. So yeah, that's something I feel like,
and just for point scoring or whatever. When the Anita Hill scandal came out, who championed Clarence Thomas?
Oh, right. Yeah, during the Anita Hill. Yeah, it was Joe Brandon. He was the one. Yep, it's true. Yeah, when he was a senator at the time, Joe Biden was a senator, and it was during the confirmation hearing, and like when the
perverts of the feather gotta stick together, I guess. Sex
fest. Yeah. Anyway, yeah. So, and also to the state legislatures, because that is true. That is how Republicans have been able to gerrymander, was by taking over state legislatures. That's something that's like pissed me off quite a bit when it comes to the left and liberals, is not taking local politics seriously, particularly taking like city council elections, school board elections, state legislatures elections, like not taking those seriously. because like you could there's a lot you can change at the local level, the local and state level that have ramifications on the national level. Like you have to look at local and state elections as like incubators for further progressive change. Because what annoys me, like every 4 years, not even just liberals, but the left in general, including like people whose politics we sympathize with, like you know, like the DSA adjacent folks, like they're so focused on the big national elections because those garner attention, but like if particularly if you want like change from the ground up in a progressive direction, yeah, you do have to start at the local and state level, build some confidence and power there, build off those victories, and then and then like try to replicate it at the larger national level. And it's also a way you can test out your ideas that like, hey, if we want to propose like uh let's say like paid family leave or you know universal like child care, like let's say like you know ch- shit like that, right? You can experiment with that at the local and state level, use it as an example of like, yeah, this worked here, let's do it on the national level. Oh, okay, you have proof that it works. All right, cool. That gives you weight to your ideas if they prove to be successful on a local and state level. But um
Or
all
another example of the importance of state legislatures. Uh, yeah, 38 states have passed bills or executive orders basically banning the boycott of Israel,
there you go, right.
which is enough.
Yeah.
It's enough to pass a constitutional amendment. Um, but yeah, like the amount of yes, every because Iowa, really needs to weigh in on BDS or North Dakota. But yeah, I mean actually North Dakota hasn't passed one. Sorry to slander you, North Dakota. But the point about that is that like I don't think there's a problem with focusing on national elections necessarily, but the issue is that like to mobilize people on a permanent level at the statewide level, for that kind of stuff, you need an actual progressive agenda for them to
Yeah.
do, and they don't want to actually. It's not even like, well, can it win? They don't want to try it, and so like you're not gonna get people to turn out for state legislature elections on the abundance agenda or whatever, like so that's my always beef if I find myself, arguing with like a terminal Democrat who it's like, well, it's the left doesn't care. It's like, well, you don't organize for a progressive agenda uh on these levels, on the state level, to actually get people to vote. Instead, they believe that like statewide elections are, where centrism really shines. It's always like this centrist governor proves that centrism wins in Virginia or whatever, and that's just it's a lack of strategic thinking, and it's a fear of holding power and wielding it for an actual agenda, transformative agenda. Because they're always like, well, if the other side gets in power, then they're gonna. Well, don't fucking let them happen. Like I don't, this is the tanking me coming out or whatever. But like, I don't understand. Like, if you have power, like, why would you not want to crush your enemies? It's a very bourgeois way of thinking that is actually inscrutable for most regular people as to like why you want your political opposition to be strong. Yeah, you gotta drill very deep down into that thinking to like get them to explain it because they will never admit it, but they want the Republican Party to be strong for some reason, which doesn't make sense because the Republicans do not want that. They're trying to crush their opposition. So I don't get it. I've never understood it, and these are the serious minded people. These are the serious political thinkers that are just thinking through more seriously than you or I ever possibly could about how to affect progressive change by nominating the most right-wing Democrats they can find.
Speaking of like the very very serious people, like that just made me think of the very serious people who hate Hasan Piker. Like we were talking about this like before we recorded, and I was thinking about Hasan because like earlier today when I was working out in my garage gym. That's usually what I do: lift weights in my garage gym, and I listen to politics, shit like that. Uh, he was being interviewed on. Oh, it was Stateside podcast on the Guardian. So the Guardian newspaper, which is UK based, they have like a like also
I feel like they got enough of their own shit to focus on. They don't need to be weighing in on what's going on over here. But fair
well, I
enough.
mean, unfortunately, like what America does impacts the rest of the world, including the UK. But it's also I think because it's English speaking media in general, so there's that. But they were interviewing is Stateside podcast. They have a YouTube channel. They were interviewing Hasan Piker, and what what I find weird is the media's obsession with Hasan Piker, because because I think their obsession with Hasan Piker outweighs the left's obsession with Hasan Piker, because he has like a I'm not trying to deny his influence, but uh like yeah, I don't think all leftists are obsessed with Hasan Piker the way that the media is. Like there's something very weird about the way that they're obsessed over him. Well, the thing is they fear him because he has a large enough following and his message resonates well enough that he could have some grassroots sway in the direction of the Democratic Party by lending his public support for DSA aligned Democratic Party politicians. Zoran Mamdani being a major case in point. The mayor of New York City. And now with the the midterm elections, who is I think is that Chris Rabb, I think, who he's like a kind of left of center politician who won in a sizable black district in Pennsylvania. I think it was, let me get the name right. Is Chris? Yeah, Chris Rabb. There you go. Yeah, he I guess he oh, here we go. Yeah, he was replacing congressman. There you go. Yeah, yeah. He's a Pennsylvania state representative. He just won a Democratic primary to replace Dwight Evans in Congress. There you go. Okay. And he's like, much more progressive politician, kind of an insurgent candidate, and I guess he was. I guess Chris Rabb was. Wasn't he interviewed on Hasan Piker? I believe. But I do think Hasan Piker definitely. Yeah, there you go. Yeah. He joined Hasan Piker's live stream interview. Yeah, it was last month. So. And yeah, Chris Rabb was interviewed on Hasan Piker. So was Mamdani, and both of them won. Rabb won the primary. Meanwhile, in fucking Kentucky, Thomas Massie lost to an obvious like AIPAC backed and Trump supported candidate to unseat Thomas Massie because he's one of the few Republicans who's publicly going against Trump. Helped release the Epstein files and is openly critical of the Iran war. I have some thoughts to share about that as well. But anyway, Hasan Piker, I think there's the very serious people, the consulting class, are scared of Hasan Piker. Because one thing that was said in the state side interview was he was asked how does he see himself, and Hasan Piker's like, well, I'm just some guy who I like. I'm an entertainer. I'm just some guy with a podcast. And the interviewer was like, well, like you're more than just that. You're not just some guy. Like you have a large following. And he was also saying like, you're not a political operative. You're not like an organizer. Like what is, he's trying to question like what's Hassan's role, which I think is a fair question because yeah, Hasan Piker, he's not an organizer. He doesn't come from like organizing the world of left wing organizing. He's not a journalist. He does come from TYT, the Young Turks, so he has media experience, but so he comes from that world. But he's not.
He does do some reporting.
Yeah, he does. Yeah, interviews and stuff like that. Yeah.
Like he'll be on the ground in some places.
Yeah. So he has like media experience. So like he's not like I guess like I guess coming from like traditional legacy media. He doesn't consider himself like a journalist in a traditional sense, but he does reporting. He does good interviews on the ground. You're right, Peter. Yeah, he does on the ground interviews. But he has a media background, so he has that. But he's not like a political operative or a consultant or an organizer, and for sure he's not an operative or a consultant. And I think that part pisses off the very serious people because he's not like a operative or
they can't. He's not a party co-opt him.
Exactly. Yeah, he cannot be co-opted, and he has a large audience. And the I think it was like one that the Bulwark podcast. They're like the safe haven from like those Bush era neoconservatives. Some of the people who should be in fucking prison right now, but they've like rehabilitated their image and become Never Trump Republicans and started the fucking Bulwark podcast. But I think the fact that they said the Democratic Party needs to condemn Hasan Piker for his views, that just made him more popular. Like it had the opposite effect. Like, oh wait, who's this Hasan Piker guy? Then some normies started listening to him, and are like, hey, I kind of like this guy. He has some reasonable opinions on things. Like,
yeah, it strikes an effect for sure. And it's like, who is this guy reaching young men? The demographic we're notoriously difficult. We're notoriously difficult with.
Right.
In the last election, he needs to be stopped.
Yeah, and that's his appeal to young men. That's another part of it, right? That I think I'll give Hasan credit for this. I think he is good at speaking directly to this generation of young men and turning them away from like the far right red pill. Like I do think if there's one thing that Hasan is like specifically good at, there's a couple things he's specifically good at. He's specifically good at that, and I also think like he's very good at like speaking directly to the Middle East perspective for a larger audience. I think he is good at that because he was raised in Turkey. And in contrast to a lot of Muslim Americans in the US, this is not to discredit their perspective, but a lot of them, if you get to know them, they're born in the US. Hasan Piker, that's not the case with him. He was born in the US, but most of his life he was raised in Turkey. So he can bring that direct on the ground experience, having grown up in a predominantly Muslim country in the Middle East from Turkey. I mean, it's not an Arabic speaking country, but he's from the Middle East. So I think him having that perspective, talking on an issue like Palestine in the Middle East, I actually think is a good thing that in my opinion, I don't think he gets enough credit for. And I do think that's part of the reason why people don't like it. Like, there's like this weird racialized hatred of him.
But like he says the truth about Israel, which is that's why he's persona non grata among the DC set, because they will cling to the Zionist fictions until their death. And I mean that's like literally because it was like the clip where he's like, America deserved 9/11. They're like, you can't align with this guy. Well, you know what? Like doing like fake flag fucking from the Democratic side, it doesn't work. Like it's never worked. And so, just also just like people have really like the other the other thing is just that these guys, the consultants, they do not understand new media. They still think in the era of
Right.
television, and so
Mm-hmm.
it's like, well, that's a
Mm-hmm.
soundbite we'll play on on cable news nonstop. We got it. We got his ass. And it's like, nah, in the content economy, like it's here today, gone tomorrow. They did like something you said three
Yeah.
weeks ago, nobody cares about. So it's just like they fundamentally don't understand like how political media works, in the 2020s. And that was proved in the last election. And they, were like, we need our own Joe Rogan. And then they're like, oh, but not that guy.
Well,
which is not to discredit Hassan by comparing him to Joe Rogan, but I'm just saying the way they talked about it.
to that point, because like we were saying before we hit record that um we're not necessarily like a left masculinity, but like I mean uh a lot of lefty guys in the media space are very soy like representing like to be fair, like even some like when I listen to Hassan, like because there's some like I mean I'm not a huge football guy, so like that kind of like makes me being I'm a very bad heterosexual guy for not liking football, so I'll admit that. But there's other stuff that like okay, Hassan's into weightlifting, I'm into weightlifting. I just realized I said it a couple of minutes ago, like when I was listening to the fucking interview, I was lifting weights. Like there's shit that I like to do that like is very predominantly male. Weightlifting is one of them. It is a very and look, in the history of weightlifting, like there's been a lot of women in weightlifting, a lot of women in bodybuilding, a lot of women in powerlifting. That goes back like decades, right? It's not just like a new thing of like women getting into weightlifting, right? But like there's something physiological, like if you're a guy, you lift weights, like you feel fucking strong, like, and it does activate that testosterone in you when you lift weight, especially if you do something like a fucking bench press or overhead press, like you feel like fucking man, right? So, like someone like Hassan, you look at him, he clearly lifts weights. He can talk about shit like, weightlifting and stuff that like is very bro coded. And speaking of like Joe Rogan, that is how Joe Rogan, like how he became big, because he was the one who made UFC very popular, like UFC and MMA fighting, because that was like UFC and mixed martial arts and jiu-jitsu and all that shit. Like that shit was very niche and kind of like its own thing. It wasn't big. Joe Rogan and his podcast, he's the one who like made MMA and UFC like a big part of American popular sports culture. So like that, like his podcasting, what he would talk about, like really, if you're gonna, it's gonna sound weird, like giving Joe Rogan credit for something, but like if there's something that Joe Rogan is actually knowledgeable about, it is about shit like fighting, mixed martial arts, UFC, stuff like that. So if you're a guy and like you're into that stuff, Joe Rogan is gonna be like usually your go-to. But he evolved from like just talking about UFC and fighting to like conspiracy theory shit and obviously politics, and like his politics takes are obviously stupid as fuck. But that is how he became big, is through UFC and MMA fighting. Hasan Piker, like he was on Twitch streaming, which is predominantly for video games, also very predominantly male space, and he's also into lifting weights. And so, like, the way Hasan presents, because part of it, the medium is the message, right? Twitch streaming is visual. You get to see someone and they talk, right? It's not like us where like you don't really see our faces that much. We're just talking. But Twitch streaming is like is visual. And that's part of the message is how you present visually on a video platform. So the way Hasan presents is like, he's Turkish, but in the context of the US, he looks white. But I think for lefties, where I think there's always like this weird thing in the left when it comes to challenging patriarchy and gender norms and like where do, you know, cisgender straight heterosexual men fit into that, and also like in our cases, if you're non-white, like how do you reconcile like, being a man in a patriarchal society, but also like coming from a racialized background where you are oppressed, but like you're still a guy, and so like there's still baggage you're gonna carry with that, and like there's still things that we have to improve on that. But so I think like I feel like the left when it comes to masculinity has like trouble trying to like I don't know, how do you be a straight cisgender heterosexual guy who's like you know still masculine but also progressive and yada
Yeah.
yada yada, and like
I mean,
like it's
I
yeah.
will say I don't really know why it's that hard because it's just like I don't know. In my mind, being a man is like standing up for the marginalized and the oppressed. Like that's a big part of it. So I've never,
Right.
and it's I will say like growing up in a like especially going to liberal church, which like literally Unitarian Universalism is liberalism as a religion. There was, and it's not like my parents like told me to be ashamed of masculinity or whatever, but I never identified with like the dominant images of it certainly in the 90s. And it's like it took a while for me to like, I will say like working in kitchens, which like in many ways are a competitive masculine environment still, unfortunately. It's like it taught me how to like communicate with, regular dudes because most of my male friends are all properly leftist and, we would never, not have properly woke talk and everything overall. But what I'll say, like, what's Hassan is good in the sense of not being soy or whatever, which sometimes just voice, but like he speaks directly and he like confronts people when they're being stupid. And
Yeah.
he just tells he doesn't try to like. I mean, he does debate like his arguments are sound and he stays on message, but he just calls people out directly, like people in the chat or whatever, and that he stays up on it and that he like stays focused is why he's an effective communicator, and that's the part um where like liberal media or whatever because needs to needs to take lessons because the Podjon NYT podcast voice of like, well, actually, like when we look into the data, like this is how it's like, and we need to understand the rest of this, and it's just like I'm already asleep, and if you're trying to
So
get,
look at the Laffer curve.
yeah, right, exactly, and it's like if you're trying to get people motivated, fired up, and mobilized, like that's just not the kind of communication you need. You need stuff that's more direct, and like in this podcast or whatever, like I still struggle because I still sort of have like more of an intellectual brain. I'm always like afraid of like I'm still like somewhat afraid of having too much testosterone because I start to feel like a meathead. So I have to like balance it out with more reading, which is fine. But um it's yeah, just the ability to like if you're talking to working class people, you have to speak plainly and directly. And
Yeah.
I don't know why, because some of these people like they're from like rural America or whatever. They're from like the shit parts of America, and it's just I don't know why they feel like they need to sound like that or whatever. But it's just yeah, it's just not helpful. And I just like unfortunately there aren't more people like him.
Well, and another thing, like why I think this kind of connects to like whenever Hassan's interviewed, the interviewers often say like he looks masculine. He looks like a bro. Like the way it's like, I mean, if you listen to his streams, like that's not the majority, like what the fuck he's talking about. But the way he's perceived, like when you look at him physically, um, he looks like a jock or a dude, bro. He looks like, okay, compare it to like high school dynamics, right? He looks like he could be like probably captain of a football team, right? Or a high school football quarterback, or maybe even like a linebacker, right? And when you think of like, okay, the politics of high school, this is my teacher self coming in. If you think of like, like the politics and hierarchies of like school environments, right? It's like jocks versus nerds. Like the jocks like the meatheads, and like they're the ones who pick on the nerds. They look like they can bully people. They're mean to you, right? And the nerds are like, fucking nerd. I got my pocket protector and my scientific calculator. Like, go to calculus class for my AP classes. Blah blah blah.
You're really dating yourself with the scientific calculator, but or actually, they still have to use them because
they still
because of the Texas Instruments Mafia.
Yeah, see, Peter, like I'm more in tune with the youth now. So like I know what they use, okay? I'm getting older, but like I know they still have to use those calculators because one of my students I had a tutor, they still needed a calculator. The thing that's different is that they have like Chromebooks and shit.
Right.
So what I had to do with one of my students actually who I was helping out last week, it's for his geometry final. I was telling him how to use the scientific calculator function on his calculator app on his phone. So, it's not like having a separate scientific calculator like back in our day. Like you have that function on your phone on the calculator app,
right,
to do things. So it's now on their phone. But it's like the same idea. You have a scientific calculator. But my point is that like connecting to this, a lot of like lefty dudes like probably were like nerds in high school. Maybe not all of them, but quite a few. Most of them. Myself included, although like I was like the straight A student who was on varsity sports. Like, I was on the track team, track and cross country. So I was like varsity athlete and straight A student. I was like one of those kids. Usually like a lot of times kids are like one or the other. Really good at sports, but like academics aren't that great, or very good at academics, but like not athletically inclined. Right? It's usually kind of falls one of those things. I was always like in high school. I kind of found like my thing in sports and then academics, and which now carry over to like I lift weights and then listen to political podcasts and shit. But like Hasan Piker, the way he looks, like I said, he looks like a football player or a jock, right? Which is very different than the image of like a lot of like male leftists in media spaces, right? They don't look like the guys who were on like the captains of the football team, right? And the reason why I say like there's this weird thing that the left has with masculinity is because, like, in a weird way, it's gonna sound. I think there are parts of the left that still want some aspects of like traditional masculine presentation. That's what I think, and I say that because people keep harping on that about Hasan. We need a leftist Joe Rogan. Oh, maybe it's Hasan Piker. He looks like a dude, bro. He looks like so masculine, but he's also progressive. It's like I actually think that's part of his appeal. That like there's a desire to have, even for someone. Oh, Grant Plattner's another example. Very left-wing guy, but part of it's like he was in the military. Wow, he's like, but he's like speaks out against.
I don't want to talk about Grant Plattner.
No, I'm not going to go further down. But I bring him up because I think it's the same idea.
That's true. That's true. He speaks more like someone in like a fantasy movie. He's got that kind of like. He's got like almost like a mid-Atlantic accent or something. He talks like he's in Lord of the Rings in my mind, but. That works in Maine for sure.
Oh, okay. Yeah, you lived in Maine. Yeah, so you would get it. But like with Hasan, I think I also think this is going to sound kind of spicy, but I do feel like there's a kind of psychosexual tension that some liberals have with them, because like, okay, who is it? That could be Francesca Fiorentini. She's funny, but she had like a it was like an Instagram reel. I mean, she's married and has a kid, but like, but her husband Matt Lieb is also a comedian. But like, she was basically the joke was that like, uh, it's not okay for Hasan Piker to be that hot. Like, it's I think that's part of the appeal is that when you look at Hasan Piker, there are a lot of people who want to fuck him. They fantasize about like, oh my god, this is big burly guy who's like above 6 foot, very conventionally masculine presenting, obviously very physically fit and could like there's something sexually attractive about a guy who looks like that. And that contradicts like the when it comes to lefties, like we're all about body positivity and blah 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 blah. Like, yeah, but some of you still want to get fucked by like a dude who looks like a lumberjack, okay? And look, there's nothing wrong with that, but it does kind of contradict some of the things that people on the left say that like we're all about body positivity. Like we want guys who are not conventionally masculine. Da da da. It's like yeah, but like you look at someone like Hasan Piker. Like look, I do think that's part of the appeal, and I'm based it on people's explicit reactions to him that they think he's hot, and that's part of like I said, the medium is a message because you see him every day live streaming. You see how he looks and how he presents. Look, if you're on something like a medium where you see someone on TV or pictures where your physical presentation is there, your physical presentation in attractiveness boosts you up. It does. It's like that's part of it. And I think when you combine someone like him, again, the way, especially the way even his critics portray him, or not even critics, but people like who
No, even Fox News is obsessed with him now because it's like
yeah,
they're like, ugh, he's this is it's about like all everyone on the left supposed to be like Alan Combs, if
right, exactly.
which like yeah, Alan Combs was picked as the ugly pencil neck to sit next to Sean Hannity forever, to represent the
Yeah.
inherent effeminacy of liberals, and yeah, I mean, just not to harp on Hassan's biceps and pecs too much, but it's like I don't we are like way more physically obsessed, like the amount to which Trump is like obsesses over like every athlete's legs or whatever. But anyway, um yeah, well just the idea that there's a certain effeminacy towards left ideas or whatever is something that I don't really understand why. Like it's definitely just a messaging issue, and I don't really understand why like the Democrats just let that fester throughout the 90s and 2000s, and it's like like yeah, like part of masculinity is like standing up for the oppressed and defending people who can't defend themselves, and it's like a big part of it in my mind. And so why like the right does not do that. They are in fact the exact opposites. And yeah, I mean a lot of them are just like pretty bitch made overall. Um right wing people, I mean. But certainly there were a little there were some machismo excesses in the new left in the 1960s, but I do think they were
Yeah.
overcorrected for. And for me, um like Marxism was like a way for me to feel like, you know, uh, comfortable in my body and my identity while knowing that like, you can fight in a way that isn't like Roman warrior wolf, like, you must like,
Right.
and it's just like
Yeah.
I never identified with anything like that. Part of how I grew up and part of just, yeah, I just wasn't raised that way. And so, I think reclaiming that and like, demonstrating the ability to fight. I mean, there's certainly a need for it, and like, from what I hear overall, it's like, yeah, at this point, like, most women want a guy with like progressive values overall, unless they are right wing themselves. which a lot of women are not, though. But it like having because like the right wing politics like become more and more incel-y, because it's so hard to like keep manufacturing grievances when you represent the most privileged classes in America. And so it
Yeah,
gets increasingly abstract and just like it, gross, and people don't want to be around that stuff. And it is just like I have a coworker who like goes to gym every day and is very buff, but like he won't shut the fuck up about his like misogynistic grievances, and it's just like, oh my god, dude, like you gotta
right.
get over it. And it's like the right wing feeds this, and it gets to a point where it's
Yeah.
like, I don't know if do you guys even like women? Like, yeah,
No,
no,
they don't. They don't.
no, they don't. I mean, yeah,
And it's
the
like,
Republican Party does not like women. Um,
and it's also this is kind of connected, but like I don't know the guy you're talking about if like he's complaining about his dating life, but like I would say like look if I don't know if because on the one hand like I mean we don't talk too much about dating on this podcast, but like and I really don't want to because there's all these stupid dating and relationship podcasts. Like most of it's full of shit, but I do think that like look if you're a heterosexual guy and I think if a woman can sniff any hint, they're like, oh, this guy thinks lowly of women in general, then like, why should she fuck you? Like, just think about like it makes no fucking sense. Like, it's like, oh, it's so hard for men to date, just be in this world and blah blah blah. It's like, okay, like on the one hand, I can understand that being a guy and dating in the reality of dating apps, it does suck. It is hard. Um, and yeah, it is like nerve wracking to go up to a woman and like one spark up a conversation because like that in and of itself, like especially if you're a little more introverted, it's kind of awkward. But like spark up a conversation that could hopefully lead to like at the very least a date. Uh, yeah, that is difficult. Like you know, you don't have to be a fucking like incel or red pill to like acknowledge that like yeah that sucks. But on the other hand, it's like okay, you're not doing yourself any favors if you're trying to be successful with interacting with women or uh be romantic with women. You are not doing yourself any favor by like going down a fucking red pill rabbit hole and just being like, well, the reason why my life sucks is because of feminists and gays are just like making shit. And it's like, okay, if you go down that route, then cool. You're just that's just a recipe for you to be more fucking miserable. And at the end, you have no one to blame but your fucking self for why you can't get laid or you're just fucking lonely. It's like a self-inflicted wound at that point. But anyway, I don't want to go too far down that. But like, there's something you said about like, yeah, like leftist ideas are seen as effeminate. Like even that right there, like the connotation of like, I mean, you're not saying, but I'm just saying like the way it's presented. But like associating anything feminine or effeminate with something negative, like that right there needs to be challenged. Because like, as a teacher, because this gets brought up in the field of education is the need for more male teachers, particularly like for younger kids, and also like for black male teachers. Like our demographic is the most underrepresented in education. Somewhere like 1.3% of all K through 12 teachers in the country are African American men. There has been an increase in representation in other demographics, like other women of color, LGBTQ folks. Like even in my lifetime, I've noticed like there are more openly gay teachers compared to like when I was in school. Like if a teacher was, gay, they were much more in the closet about that, and kids might be like, "Oh, are they huh?" You wouldn't in the 90s and 2000s, like things were very different compared to now. Um, but when it comes to black men, like yeah, we're the most underrepresented. So this gets brought up in discussions, even like being a substitute, like uh, even kids, like for example, when I've substituted for younger kids, like let's say from preschool to second grade, like they'll be like, "Oh, there's a guy here. Oh, that's interesting." Because if you go to elementary school, the vast majority of the teaching staff are women. Um, Usually white women. There are more women of color, but like when I step into the room, it's very different. And even the way like young boys will interact with a male teacher, it is different. It's almost like this comes up quite often. It's like you almost become like their dad for a bit or their uncle, because they want to, and I think that's very natural for a young boy to want to have an emotional bond with an older male figure, because oftentimes some of these boys may have dad at home, but the dad is there but not there. The dad's not emotionally present. Like you see that quite a bit with fathers. So when there's a male teacher, the male teacher often like sometimes fills that role of like a dad, just an older male figure who's emotionally present for a young boy, right? And I think that's part of a young boy's development. I said it because, okay, the idea of being nurturing toward children is seen as very feminine, and if you believe like the conservatives, it's less masculine. It's less masculine if you are nurturing toward children because that's a woman's thing. You're a man. You're supposed to go out there and fucking work and lift weights and like to be a man. Just be like, yeah, I'm a man. I'm supposed to fuck go out there and work, put food on the table. You gotta respect me. Give me the big chunk of fucking steak because I'm the man. Versus like, yeah, you could be a man like emotionally present for your kids. Try to instill some values in them. I would say that's masculine, being nurturing toward children. Obviously, it's going to be different than how a woman is going to do it, and there's nothing wrong with that. But I would consider that to be masculine. You don't need big fucking muscles or a shit ton of money to do that. I mean, if you're a male teacher, if you are a man in the field of education, you are not making like a fucking high value man salary status level of masculinity. But to bring it back, I say this because I've noticed in a lot of these fucking interviews, when Hasan Piker's interviewed, they bring that up. I like like I said, the interview I was listening to him today, they brought that up like, because they said like, they called him like dude, bro, and I'm like, okay, I thought it was a little too much. I thought it was fair to challenge him on issues like gender and maybe some of the language he uses. Like I thought that was fair, but like I think the media's obsession with him being a dude bro is weird, but I think that's part of like uh like I don't know. It's like to me I kind of feel like it's a weird psychosexual obsession they have with them. That's what I think. That's something I've been thinking about, like when the way they obsess over Hasan Piker and like I think he's become like this easy punching bag that like if they can tear him down, then they can discredit.
Yeah, I mean, it's
yeah.
if you want a nuclear take, I was like, this is very much almost Israeli thinking. You got to take out the leadership, kill the head or whatever. And they like they were because I mean certainly the Zionists are out for him, but very much it's just like yeah man, we just got to take him down and then we can like take the rest of the Bernie wing or whatever you want to call it.
Right.
And the rest will follow, and it's a little more the left media ecosystem's a little more durable than that, and also like they're just so bad at it. Like I don't really even see like how like I don't really understand how you would take him down or like what the goal is, but it's just like yeah, like you just gave him like up until a year ago, like nobody outside of like the left media ecosystem, chronically online people who obsessed over politics, like really knew who he was. And now, your average Rachel Maddow watcher knows who Hasan Piker is. And, initially it's probably like, oh, he's bad, but then it's, you know, they see some of his clips on Facebook or whatever. They're like, oh, well, he doesn't seem that bad. And certainly doesn't seem like public enemy number one. So, I
Yeah.
don't know
Yeah.
what they got next. Like, I will say generally we should probably wrap this up because I have to go to work
Yeah.
tomorrow.
Yeah.
Um, but there's still part of me that's like traumatized by 2020 and just like seeing, how they like I knew they had to take down Bernie somehow, but I didn't know how. And, like the Obama House of Cards moment where he made the card over, and just that just so happening to coincide with the pandemic. Um, like, but they really like the Dem operatives. They really felt themselves after that. They were like, yeah, we're fucking operators, baby. We fucking did that shit. Don't say we don't know how to do real hard nosed politics. This is real fucking politics. You want to come at the king, you best not miss. And then they put in a guy who fucking died in office basically, and we all had to watch him run for president while being dead. And so I don't know what there's still part of me that is like you know the the consultant class whose job it is to do the bidding of the donor class and all the billionaires, like ultimately the power of the party will always, return to the donor class. But I don't know what kind of boost they got. And I don't know if they know what kind of moves they got. I don't think they believe in themselves anymore. Even James Carville seems a little out to lunch probably because he's that fucking old. Um, but it's just like I don't know. You got fucking Seth Moulton, like what is this crap? And so we'll see what happens. They always find a way to just muddle the narrative enough to be like, well, at the end of the day, the way to consolidate power of the Democratic Party is to try and win over Republicans, which makes no fucking sense. But like they're always like, yeah, we need to appeal to Republicans and not the people who already vote for us. Why? I don't know. But that's what smart thinking passes. But people, increasingly like the beauty of it is like I don't, unless I happen to be like in a hotel room and I turn on MSNBC, I never have to hear what any of these people are saying about any of it. And that's the reality we live in now is that like they don't control the flow of information the same way. I mean, the algorithms do certainly, but for the ones that like you are able to curate your feed such that like the New York Times or CNN or MSNB, MS Now, whatever. It's always MSNBC to me. Okay, I don't care what they
Yeah.
call it.
Yeah. I'm not calling it
It's
MS
it's
Now's
always
fucking stupid
MSNBC to
ass
me.
name.
Um, they don't get to just decide. This is what the acceptable political opinions on the liberal slash left are. They like no like the people that listen to them. You know, they still may have a little more. They have a disproportionate influence within the party structure, but the masses, they don't fucking listen to Pod Save America. They're not listening to this shit. Like their
No.
numbers ain't that hot, and like people are pretty fucking pissed off, and if you're not even gonna prosecute these guys, if you're like, because I truly don't know what like the national message is for the Democratic Party going into the midterms, but if it's not like wall to wall hearings and trying to come and on every single crime that they did every single day in the past 2 years, Like that's one thing where it's like, okay, maybe all the lawyers in the party, why don't you actually prove your usefulness and like start drawing up the cases, man. If you get the House and the Senate, like, yeah, you can indict people. So like get fucking started. Like I want to see them demonstrate their willingness to do that. And that's not even ideological. That's just like preserving the institutions, really. That's the shit they've been talking about this whole fucking time. So if they're not even gonna do that, and if they're not really gonna do anything other than just like, okay, well, it's almost like they're gonna throw it on purpose, or like they'll get, they might get the House, but it'll be a narrow majority, and there'll be enough blue dogs, and then they won't get the Senate, or, like it always is, and then they won't because they ran on some triangulated centrist bullshit, and then they can just, I love the Threads comment that's like, well, you keep telling them to do anything, but they don't have any fucking power. And it's like, well, that's a goddamn point. You're not serious about
Right.
getting power to actually do something. So,
And when they and what do they do? And when the Democrats do get power, like what, like they don't like
yes, there's always a fucking
they
Joe Manchin.
right, exactly. It's like, well, we can't do anything because Joe Manchin and Kristen Sinema are being fucking mean to us. We can't do it. It's like, oh, great,
We need
okay.
to worry about
And
their
it,
seats when they're not doing anything for us. Like, no, until the Democrats demonstrate a break with all of their past behavior, I don't have to listen to them.
yeah. And before we close off, this might be worth mentioning, but apparently, yeah, there is a shooting near the White House. So Secret Service shot a guy who was opening fire, like away from the White House. And there's like another shooting. Like it was at the fucking I think it was the White House correspondent. It was some fucking ball or some shit.
Oh yeah, no, the White
But
House Correspondents' Dinner shooting. That one was
yeah,
so
that one,
weird. I'm
yeah,
like, you guys don't
that
have
one seemed
security for that?
that one seemed fake. But this one, I'm like, um, I'm like, okay, I don't think it's fake. But I'm just like, man, there's just more. This is showing like how much a lot of people just don't like Trump, and I don't know. I think we're probably going to see more of these types of just one-off shootings in Trump's vicinity. But also, it's like, I don't know. Trump's security doesn't seem like it's good. I don't think he has good security. I'm surprised no one has actually killed him yet. Because remember the fucking guy in Pennsylvania who
Yeah,
sniped him, and like Trump got lucky because he turned his head, and it's just like fucking just grazed his earlobe,
maybe.
but didn't
I do have a couple
like.
questions about that one, but yeah, I mean, certainly he did get that. Was like an inch away from getting JFK'd for sure.
Yeah, and I think I think we're gonna see more of like these random just one-off shootings. I mean, fucking Charlie Kirk. I mean, he got fucking just whacked. Like, um, in that video, like, I mean, Charlie Kirk was a piece of shit. But like seeing the video of like just, I mean, I don't know.
Yeah,
I think
that one
videos.
fucked up my day for a little while.
Yeah, because I do think like it's not good to be completely desensitized to just like a human being just getting killed like that. Like it's just like, oh dang, damn, it's like it's pretty gruesome. Like again, no love for Charlie Kirk whatsoever. But like, oh damn, like that image is like, ugh. Um, but I think we're gonna see more of these types of just random killings,
Yeah,
these
well,
random shootings. Sorry, I mean we're already seeing it, but like I think we might see
yeah.
an
I mean,
uptick in it.
there's mass shooting every day, basically. And
But but I'm but I mean targeted toward
yeah.
like Trump, like
Oh,
this political violence.
yes. I mean, as crazy as America is, and you're just making life worse for everyone, and at this point being like, I don't give a fuck about the American people. I mean, that's what he said when they were like, mean, when he was like, "Yeah, it's not the government's job to provide healthcare at all," and then when they're like, "Do you care about the finances of the American people when you're figuring out what to do in Iran?" He's like, "Hell no. Why do I care about
Right.
that?"
Yeah.
And it's
Yeah.
yes, every system that's based on pure coercion, like and violence, like will meet its end through violence. If you don't give people any other way, um, to resolve the issue, like that's what's gonna happen. And so yeah, I think Chavo talks about this, but on some level, it's like the base almost needs him to be assassinated for their
Mm.
project because like he gets out of there in 2028 and then he just like goes to jail or not. It's just like yeah, like he almost needs to be assassinated. So I don't know. It's not a fun time in America, but
Uh,
that's
Actually, I want to just ask this question. Maybe it's the last question, but um, I was wondering, like, this idea of okay, because I mentioned Thomas Massey, and there's like kind of, I guess, rumblings of whether there should be like a left right coalition opposing Israel and the U.S. war machine because of people like Tucker Carlson, Candace Owens, Marjorie Taylor Greene, and Thomas Massey, these Republican figures. In the case of Tucker and Candace, media figures, and then Marjorie Taylor Greene famously like stepped down from Congress. And then Thomas Massey lost his congressional seat in Kentucky in the recent primary. Like, especially with the loss of Thomas Massey, I've heard some like maybe some people on the left say like, oh, maybe he should join our side. Um, I don't think like there's like major calls for like let's say like a MAGA slash PSL, you know, super group or whatever the fuck. Um, but I've heard like some people. It's just mostly posting online. I don't think it's going to be anything like organized on a serious basis. Um, but I think like a show like Breaking Points kind of represents like some sort of spirit of a left right anti establishment coalition, so to speak. Um, and I'm like, okay, this is what I think because Chapo Trap House they had like a pretty good uh discussion about this because AOC was apparently asked like about working with Marjorie Taylor Greene on Israel Palestine, and she said she was against it, but Chapo Trap House I think made some good points that like, well, she's work with other right wing members of Congress when it came to other things, but like this is where she and Sana Saeed on Bad Faith podcast, she made a very good point that okay, yeah, like don't work with white nationalists, but how come people aren't drawing a red line in working in coalition with Zionists? That like, okay, if you're going to oppose working with white nationalists, you should have the same standard for Zionists. So anyway, uh, my kind of feelings on it when it comes to, I think it's okay to like, okay, acknowledge where Candace Owens, Tucker Carlson, Marjorie Taylor Greene, and Thomas Massey are right when it comes to specific issues. But for me, that's a case of a broken clock is right twice a day. Yeah, they are right on those issues, but and I think like you can make short term strategic coalitions on specific issues to get things done. Like I'm not even opposed to that in principle, but like if there's like a larger end goal for the left of when it comes to challenging American imperialism, like you cannot count people like Candace Owens and Thomas Massey to be long-term allies in that fight, because that's not their end goal. Like, their end goal is pretty fucking clear. Like, they want, like, white nationalist conservative America. That's their end goal. That's their project. That's what their ideology leads towards. And yes, I'm associating that even with Candace Owens, her being a black woman. I mean, like, this is what kind of pisses me off, that Candace Owens anti-black racism, people just forgot about that shit. The nasty shit she said about George Floyd, but now people are like, wow, like, she's like so outspoken on Palestine. Yeah, she's right on that issue, but like, look, I'm not saying that, like, I don't think Candace Owens should be invited back to the black community because, like, she got kicked out of the Daily Wire. Like, I don't fucking care. But um yeah, I just wanted to mention that because I've been hearing people talk about that in the context of Thomas
Oh,
Massey losing in
no.
Kentucky. Yeah,
I mean,
because yeah, so
uh,
I'm wondering
okay,
your thoughts, and then
yeah. I'm
we can
trying to
close
think if
out.
there's, I'm sure there's a Lenin quote that deals with this. Um, they said this back in like 2000. They're like, the left, anti-war left, and the libertarians should team up. Here's the thing, why, like, you can't work with these, like, the left, you can't work with libertarians back then. Like, you can't, the fact that they have to, the fact that anybody on the right is coming out against Israel is a reflection of just like how poorly the opinion is on it. And a large part of
Right.
that is because the actual work of the pro-Palestinian movement. There's no working with the right is like you you don't ever win. You're just giving your power away. They certainly never are like, yeah, in the common good, they will always figure out how to backstab you and sell you out as soon as possible. And you know, like, there's, unless you're in like extreme rural, like if you're in Montana, you may have to play the hand you're dealt. Um,
Right.
okay. Like in very specific circumstances where like you are in like very right wing areas, but you're not like, we are coming together for this. Like, that's never in the history of history, like that's never like achieved anything. And it's like, I don't know. There's some stuff where it's like, I don't know if it's lack of ideological discipline or whatever, but it's like you guys are losing the plot. Like, like, you're building your own movement, your own organ of political power, and like, I guess it's gross to talk about gaining power in the midst of human tragedies or something, but that's politics. That's what it is.
Right.
So, I like, if someone on the right wants to switch sides, sure, welcome them. But
Yeah. Right.
like a
Yeah.
left-right coalition, that just always ends up benefiting the right and giving the left's leverage away. So
Th- yeah.
I wouldn't buy into
That's
that.
what.
And I it's
Yeah.
it's kind of like it's like, yeah, there's no pat sock. You want a nationalist socialism, huh? I wonder how that one went.
Right.
Right? Like, it's like you're allergic to doing the hard work of actually educating the masses because you're like, oh yeah, well, we'll just glom on to like this right wing demagogue who says one thing we agree with, but everything else is disgusting because it's easier for us. No, you gotta actually do the work, because there's no room for the enemies. So
Yeah. And I'll say this, and I think this will be a good place to close it out. But I've this will be a phrase I haven't said in a while, but definitely applicable here. Cracker Barrel politics. That's what I call, like, the idea of a left right coalition. I came up with the term, like, Jimmy Dore said something like pretty silly about, like, the Black Panthers, like, the like black radicals working with, like, like some MAGA shitheads or something like that. It was something along those lines, and I was like, I thought it was so fucking ridiculous that like I called it like Cracker Barrel politics. But it's the same idea, like a left right coalition. Another phrase I've heard that like I think is applicable is like a red brown alliance. They're like, oh,
Oh
there's
yeah,
like an alliance between
that's gonna work out great.
right, like an alliance between communist and fascist. Like what? But I call that like Cracker Barrel politics because first of all, the idea is so fucking ridiculous that like I just came up with that term to describe something I just found so fucking stupid. But and also like I kind of think like, oh, the kind of like MAGA chuds that like they want the left to be in coalition with. I imagine that they are the types of people who go to fucking Cracker Barrel. So like, hence
Yeah.
my why call. But like, to your point, why? Let me put it this way: like when it comes, like let's say for black people, if black people are going to be part of like the left, part of like a left, long-term left project. I don't think black people have anything to gain by working in coalition with like the MAGA shithead base. Now, yes, if there are some turncoats, if some of them wind up like having a come to Jesus moment and like switch sides, hey, you're welcome. Like if someone is like a MAGA shithead, but then are like, you know what, we agree with Pan-African socialism. Because we realize how we saw the error of our ways and now like we want to join like the Black Revolution. Cool. Welcome aboard. I still have some questions like
Yeah.
how the fuck did that happen?
You don't get
like,
to go to the front of the line. Like, you
fuck no.
gotta start at the bottom. But
you gotta work your way to prove yourselves. But anyway, like I think a coalition like that where like some sort of like pat sock MAGA communism bullshit, like I don't think that would work long term for black people because let's say the issue of reparations come up. How are those like MAGA pat sock MAGA communist left right coalition people going to feel about that? Because whenever I hear them talk and it gets brought up, they're like they kind of poo poo it. Like, I don't know. To me, they seem the type of people. I don't want to start like a. They seem like the type of people that would listen to Bad Empanada.
oh,
Or like like oh okay, you might like be welcome there, but
I haven't encountered him in so long. I forget what his opinions are. But like,
I mean I just know that like there are people in the Bad Empanada crowd who hate Hasan Piker, so that's how I know about him. But like I've listened to some of his videos and like when black issues get brought up, yeah, don't look for any like compassion for black people in the comment section on a Bad Empanada video. That's all I'll say. So but my point of bringing it up is like, okay, if there's like some like left right MAGA communism coalition, like we're gonna join Thomas Massey and Tucker Carlson with like the left, like oh, I don't think that's gonna work out for black people. Like I don't think black people have anything to gain from that.
not even the black conservatives.
No, absolutely not. So that's one thing I would like to highlight is yes, I do think that the left oftentimes like will just get like overpowered by the right in a coalition like that. Because like if you get in coalition with like someone who's stronger than you, then the person who's stronger is gonna wind up winning out more. It's just like if you're weaker and someone's stronger, what happens is that you wind up like just getting protection from someone that's stronger than you. It's not really like a coalition. You're just like partnering with someone stronger because you want their muscle and their protection. If you're coming together as equals in coalition, you wind up empowering each other. That's what a coalition is.
I mean, which also I guess there's room for negotiations such that like you
right.
don't, You want to bring up fucking Molotov, Ribbentrop, or whatever. Or Marcus Garvey saying that the KKK is black man's best friend. Um, in those kind of situations, there's room for negotiations into like not destroying each other immediately, to take out, a third party or whatever. If you can pull it off, sure, but those are not good faith negotiations. Those are both sides have a gun pointed at each other, and it's just like, well, we're gonna agree to not, fire the gun now, because there's another problem that we both would deal with. But that's not an alliance. Like, I mean, overall alliances in of themselves are just kind of like, I don't know, man. Like I said, I guess it's the tanky in me coming out. Like, build your own thing. Like, you gotta build your own organism that, you know, redounds the power to you. You know, alliances will always eventually break apart. So I don't know. That's
Yeah.
that's me being crazy.
Yeah.
But
Yeah. I guess
yeah,
yeah, we can end on this. Yeah, and to tie it all together, I mean, alliances, there need to be long-term goals attached to them, like a long-term vision. And the long-term vision of the left and the right are irreconcilable. So you're not going to have like a whatever coalition you have between the left and the right is going to be short-lived and temporary, which it's okay to have that, but it's not going to be long-term. But speaking of like long-term vision, um, you know, Pan-African socialism, the ideology, like that is like part of the long-term vision of black liberation globally, which is the philosophy that motivates the ethos of this podcast. So, because we believe like the left needs a vision, we also believe black people need a vision. Especially if you're going to talk about black liberation, there should be a vision for what black liberation actually looks like. And Pan African socialism is like one way, is like I would argue like the highest form of black liberation and probably the most logical endpoint for liberating black people globally. So um, that is a kind of line of thinking we're going to be fleshing out definitely a lot more in this podcast. In my solo episode, I connected Pan Africanism to like culture and the African roots of Black American culture, particularly blues music. So I want to say that to wrap up this episode, but also like encourage you to keep listening to us. So if you like this episode and you are sympathetic with the ideology or like you want to learn more, then become a patron. $3 a month, you just become a patron, but no access to bonus episodes. That's at Real Sun Car Hour. Patreon.com/Real Sun Car Hours. $5 a month gets you access to bonus episodes. That includes Peter's solo commentary and other stuff, other kind of bonus content we put out there. So yeah, you get access to bonus stuff in obviously the bonus episodes. And yeah, and that keeps this podcast afloat and allows us to do more stuff. And oh yeah, if our website realsuncarhours.org, and if you're listening to us on YouTube, please become a subscriber. And even better, if you subscribe and click the bell notification icon, you can be notified of future video uploads. So yeah, that is that. Keep the faith.
stay dangerous.
All right, peace out, y'all.
See ya.